Well, I just pulled out this 5-horse McDonald submersible here. See if we can see the nameplate on here. A little hard to read, but there's your details. 3-wire, 3-phase, 5-horse. A 4-inch style motor. And of course this lower part is the motor. The upper part is the pump itself. And I'll show you a couple of observations I saw as soon as I removed it. When I picked it up and pulled it out and carried it up the bank, the motor felt loose from the pump. And when you look right there, you can see that nut's not all the way down. There should be a little bit of the stud sticking out above the nut, just like on the right side there. But on the left there isn't. So either they didn't tighten it down all the way, or the lock washer corroded out, because they used the wrong style hardware. Here's another observation. That looks like a standard zinc nut. That's not a stainless nut. And obviously that's not a stainless lock washer. So we have improper hardware on this thing holding it together. This side looks alright, so they got 2 of the 4 right, but only getting half of them right isn't good enough for a pump. They all need to be done right. Another issue I found is there was a big wad of duct tape all over the suction area here. You can see this electrical tape's been dangling for a while. You can see both sides. This has been flopping around for who knows how long. And look where it's going to go when the pump turns on. It's going to go right inside here. Well, there's that big wad of tape I pulled out of the suction side of the pump. If you're going to use tape underwater, you got to use a good brand of tape. Don't use Harbor Freight tape underwater. It will not last. So make sure you're using a good name brand tape if you're using it underwater. You shouldn't use electrical tape, and you shouldn't really use zip ties, because these are all subject to failure. What you should use is a hose protector and a stainless steel hose clamp. That's far superior than zip ties or tape. You're kind of asking for problems using this. And who knows how long this has been getting sucked in here. Who knows how many other pieces already went through the system. And who knows how many zip ties are broken off laying through here. Well, we're going to take this area apart, get it connected back together right, get the cables secured down right, and I bet you we'll be able to make this thing perform. Here's another issue. Coming out of the pump we have an SO style cable. This is what you want to use. Going to a bunch of bare wires. Then we got a real funky connection. Then we got blue sheathing, white sheathing, back to a blue tape, and then back to bare wires. This needs to be SO cable the whole way. You really shouldn't run bare wires in such a harsh environment. You really got to run the SO cable the whole way. It's more expensive, but it's definitely worth it. See if we can get in on this connection right here. See that corrosion coming through the tape? We got a bad connection in there. So that's probably the issue. We're not getting full power to the pump. Doing a half-ass connection and then taping the hell out of it isn't good enough. That was prone to fail, and I'm sure whoever did it knew that. Well, we're opened up a little more on that bad connection, and I can tell already that connection is burned out. That's a bad connection right there. Hopefully we got to it soon enough before it caused damage to anything. So let's try some electrical improvements, and then put some power to it and see what happens. Here's another issue, not the pump issue, but a service line issue leading away from the pump. I can see all the wires have already rusted away, and there is hardly anything left holding this. I could poke my thumbnail right through there if I tried. You gotta look at the project as a whole. No pun intended, a whole. But what would happen here if we get the pump going, within a month this would blow out, and I would get a phone call saying the pump's performing poorly. We got a low pressure issue or something like that. And a guy would have to pull the pump back out, and a guy would do some electrical testing on the pump, find out that the pump seems to be running fine, pull the thing out of the water, and then you find a service line issue. So whenever you do the pump, you got to look at the project as a whole. The pump, the motor, the service line, the wires, the housing, the environment it's used in, the supply source of water, and the use for the water. You got to consider everything as a whole and base your diagnosis and repair off the system as a whole, not just as a pump, or not just as a motor, or not just as a plumbing, or not just as an electrical issue. You really got to know all the components and think about how they work together. Otherwise you'll be doing the same job within a month. And of course if this blows out, you're going to get a call back real soon saying something's wrong, and normally they want to point the finger at you. But since we found this, we need to sell them a new service line leading away from the pump. This whole thing's bad. Not only is the service line bad, but the connections are likely no good. There's a king nipple underneath there, and I could already tell you it's rusted out. So this king nipple that sits right here needs to be replaced, and likely these old galvanized connections should be replaced too. Stainless is obviously superior, but it gets kind of costly in these big fitting sizes, so the use of galvanized is probably just fine. They used your most basic wire nut on the wire ends here, and they were sitting in a box that had no lid and was completely open to the environment. It was tied up with some string, but it was getting rained on, splashed on, and completely exposed to the environment. If you're using basic wire nuts, you gotta have them protected. You can't leave them exposed to the environment like that. They were literally rusted on when I went to remove them. I had to remove them with a pair of pliers. It's good that they're on tight, but it's not good that they're exposed to the environment and corroded on there. So that's another issue, is poor wire connections like that. And that one was an obvious one because he just walked up and looked at it and said, "Oh geez, look at that." As they were completely exposed, completely open. Nothing was covering them, nothing was hiding them. There was zero protection at all right there. I can see something was securing the wires to the pipe right there. That's probably that big section of duct tape I found in the suction side of the pump. But you can see what happens to the galvanized fittings. They get ugly pretty quick. And going from a 6-inch nipple to a coupler to another 6-inch nipple isn't exactly the right thing. A single 12-inch nipple would be better than two 6-inch nipples with a coupler in between. Take a look at those king nipples. Those are in real bad shape. There's not much barb left at all. A lot of the tip is completely worn off too. So they were due for replacement. And that right there is why the pump felt sloppy. The pump and motor were barely hanging on. Those two nuts on the left weren't even finger tight. And I don't know what to say about that far left one. It's definitely not a stainless nut. It's completely rotted away. The other three are questionable. They're probably stainless, but they might be from Harbor Freight or something. One of the lock washers was completely gone, or wasn't put on to begin with. The other lock washer was about corroded away, and then it looks like there was two decent ones, probably from the original installation. So you got to be mindful about which hardware you're using. You got to use stainless components. You got to spend the money on stainless hardware. Otherwise it's real common to see the pump and motor come wiggling apart. This right here was a contributing factor. This right here is destined to fail. And on the pump we got our new stainless hardware, new lock nuts, all secured nice and tight. That's a machine thread nut, and our hardware store didn't have regular machine threaded nuts. They just had these jam nuts in a machine thread. So that's likely why those first set of nuts were incorrect. A person couldn't find machine nuts in stainless, so they just used a zinc nut. That's incorrect. Don't use basic zinc hardware. Use stainless. You gotta sanitize the studs real well. Take one of these small wire pipe cleaners, chuck it in your cordless, and go in and out around the stud and get all the corrosion off. That step's got to be done before you put the new hardware on. If you're skipping that step, you're making a mistake. Take a look at the new discharge tube setup. I recreated it, a new heavy-duty tube, all the way down to this adapter, as it looks like that bushing was ready to fail. That's the next component that's going to fail right there. That bushing's going to come apart. And here at the other end, instead of the coupler and bushing, I used a bell reducer. A much cleaner, much nicer setup. Looks a lot better than that ugly thing, that's for sure. That pile of trash right there came off and was replaced by the nice stainless steel clamp holding our wires to our pump. So don't use an abundance of trash to secure your wires. And here was one of our sources of the problem, that ugly knot of mess on your left, replaced by that nice spool of wire on your right, using the correct submersible pump cable and the correct wire coupling. I still want to take that one apart because I can just see it is burnt out right there. It even smells burnt. So it'd be fun to take that apart and see what it looks like. But that was most likely the source of our problem right there. And we got a new box to put our wire nuts in up top. The old wire nuts were just exposed to the environment. This way we can get them nice and protected. That was another source of our issue. Exposed wire nuts. And there's the box the wire nuts were in. Look at that thing. It is destroyed. There was no cover on it. All the tape was off. It was just dangling there with the wire nuts exposed. All the wire nuts were dangling right here, completely exposed to the environment. There was no protection at all. I don't know if we can see in there, but those wire nuts are completely rusted out. They are so rusty and corroded in there, there was no power going through there. The only power was rust power flowing through these nuts. Here's our new cable splice right here. Double crimp down with the cable crimper, double heat shrinks on each connection, and then double heat shrink over the entire splice, locking everything together real sanitary. You can see that is a superior setup over what I took off. You never want these individual strands exposed going in and out of the water. You're only asking for problems. So always avoid individual strands going in and out of the water. Always do something like that. I didn't have a camera with me this morning when I did a quick diagnosis. but I was able to throw the amp clamp around each individual wire, and that yellow wire was real jumpy. It was inconsistent with the other ones. So that yellow wire is definitely the one with the bad connection. Well, we got a pretty bad glare going on, but the green bar is reading 20 amps exactly, nice and consistent. We can overlay the voltage. We're running right in the 120s, nice and consistent. No peaks, no drops. That's what we want to see. Let's try the next leg. Same thing, nice and consistent. It's running real steady. The pump's running real smooth. There's no chatter, there's no vibration, there's no jumps, no spikes in the electricity. And here's our third leg. This is the one that was giving me problems yesterday. I had my normal amp clamp on it and it would completely drop out. I would look at it and it would say 245, and then you would notice it was milliamps, which means you're not drawing anything. So all three legs are running real smooth. The pump's performing really well. I can't even hear the darn thing running. Yesterday I could hear it going, and today it's just purring and running smooth. Real good performance. So we have a proper fix here. This issue is solved.